guys, welcome to another episode of Break It Down with Braydon. I got Austin Gottsacker on with me today. Austin, thanks for joining.
Of course, dude. Glad to be here.
Absolutely. Austin and I have known each other for 4 years now. You've been
Going on 4 years, I think.
Going on 4 years, yeah. Part of the Saguaro group, previously Scottsdale 2030, and just been awesome getting to know you. And Austin's with Simon CRE, and they're just crushing it out there in the commercial space and doing some really cool things. So tell everybody kind of a little bit of background of yourself, kind of how you got into commercial real estate and how you got linked up with Simon.
Yeah, of course. So born and raised here in Arizona, went to Chaparral High School. In Chaparral, they actually had a class where you could get your real estate license your senior year. Yep. So took that, graduated, got my real estate license. The summer going into my freshman year, I actually sold 2 houses. And so I had like kind of a hot start going into it. And I was like, this real estate thing's actually kind of cool. Like,
I got this.
Yeah, this is a lot better than like working at McDonald's or whatever else. So I thought that was really cool. Did that for like another 6 months. Actually started working with Russell Shaw.
Okay.
So like I'm not bragging, I'm applying for a job. Like started working for him. I was like his weekend guy.
Okay.
So I was like managing all of his listings, doing contract negotiation, kind of the whole Rolodex of that stuff.
Yep.
And then my sophomore year of college, I had the opportunity to start interning at Simon CRE. So Simon CRE, where I still am today. Yep. So we're a retail developer based here in Scottsdale. We do everything from single tenant coffee deals all the way up to 700,000 foot ground up kind of regional mall developments. So everything retail, and then we do some stuff kind of outside of the true core retail business, but that's really like what our bread and butter is. Yep. So started interning there my sophomore year. After about a year, I actually switched to full-time. So my junior year, I was kind of like
full-time
fully in it. Yeah, like I just loved it. I loved the commercial stuff. Stopped doing the residential stuff on the weekends and was just kind of full tilt, like this commercial thing's so cool. Like I loved all the people I was working with, loved everything that I was learning. And I've been there for 7 years now. Okay. So still just grinding away, trying to make some commercial deals.
Love it. It sounds like it's home.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, it's awesome. We have a really good team, and it's grown so much since I've been there too. When we started, I think we had 8 people, 10 people. Okay. We've got over 60 now. So it's been so cool of not only like my personal growth, but I've been able to grow with the company as the company's grown as well. Yep. So going from when we first started developing nothing but Dollar Generals to now developing like pretty considerable projects that really have a lot of just impact in the communities that they're in. Yep. So it's been such a cool kind of transition, both personally and for the company itself.
Yeah, that's one reason why I love talking with you always, is because you always know like what's coming up in town, big development things that are kind of happening. Mm-hmm. And so you kind of know before things are actually taking place, or like where the residential community should be looking because of new developments that are happening, and then obviously the retail stuff. So it's just it's always fun kind of talking to you and intriguing kind of the big picture of what's going on in real estate in the Valley and what's up and coming. Yeah,
well, the saying always is retail follows households. Yep. And so our company does a very good job of following all the new developments going on throughout the Valley, where all the growth is, where stuff isn't really growing, following demographics, everything. In Phoenix, we're extremely good at that. And then outside of Phoenix, it's building relationships with the local brokers that can just run circles around us. Like we can't compete if we go to Dallas. Right. There's no way I'm going to know Dallas like I do Phoenix. And so it's also such a game of building relationships for all the people outside of Arizona, of just being able to get the best information that you can to figure out where your development should go.
Yeah, because you guys are doing stuff nationally as well, right?
Yep. Yeah, I mean, most of our stuff's outside of Arizona.
Yeah. So talk about some of the other projects, how you've met some of those individuals and stuff, because I know you're always going to like a ton of conventions and stuff, meeting other individuals in the space, which is huge. Yeah,
so with retail, especially when you're doing the national tenant development, you follow the tenants more so than you do spec land development. So if you're working with somebody like a Dollar General, for instance, Dollar General has a full real estate team that's dictating where they want to go nationally. They have 18,000 stores in the United States, which it's like more Dollar Generals in the United States than there are McDonald's, which very few people even
know that.
Yeah, because they're not in the areas that like we would generally be going. Yep. They're in very, very small towns. Okay. So when you're looking in towns like that, Dollar General is the one that's kind of dictating it. Because if you think about it from the global perspective, we're making a commitment to build it, but they're making a commitment to sign a 15-year lease. So they're committing that they're going to open and operate this store for 15 years, which it's a pretty intense capital investment. It's really intense in terms of the logistics to get everything to there. So for a lot of the stuff, you're following the tenants. So building the relationships in all of those different areas, it totally depends kind of how we get there and how everything starts. But a lot of it's just you work with one guy on one deal, and then that parlays into now you're working with this guy in this deal, and then, oh, by the way, I've got a buddy that's looking to do something in this state, and you're kind of always parlaying one thing into the next, which is kind of the greatest thing about it, is like you build one relationship, you think it's just going to be one random phone call.
Just blossom.
And now you're working with a guy every single day in 4 different states, and you're kind of putting together a bunch of deals.
Well, and it's cool, too, because you're talking to, like, the ownership of these organizations and really working with them to see really what their goals are and making sure that you're adhering to all those things that they're looking for. And it's pretty cool to hear all the time. Talk about kind of some projects you guys have coming up.
Yeah, so right now the biggest thing keeping us busy is the single tenant deals. Like, used to be the bread and butter of what we did. We've been able to transition to doing a lot more multi-tenant developments. So that's buying, call it 5 to 15 acres. You have 1 or 2 guys that you know you can get on the site when you start. And then my role is, okay, well, now we've got 1 or 2, but we need 8 or 10 guys to take the spot. So who are the 8 to 10 guys going to be? And so it's going out, doing the leasing, meeting with all the brokers, kind of putting together the whole deal as we're going through entitlements on it. So everything's, you have like 6 different like timelines all moving in conjunction with each other. So it's just like a million different pieces at any given point. But that's also the best part about it, right? Is it's every single deal is different. You can do one like directly across the street in the exact same jurisdiction with a similar tenant. It's going to be totally different. So everything, every single day is just totally night and day.
When I remember last time when we were grabbing drinks or whatever at happy hour, you were telling me about how certain tenants require different things as well. And so like if you have a certain, I forget which one it was, but it was a certain restaurant, then you can't have any restaurants that serve any kind of food remotely close to that.
Yeah, it's a disaster. So you have, every tenant's going to have a bunch of exclusives, right? So if you're working with a McDonald's, they're not going to want Wendy's to go right next to them. If you're working with Starbucks, they're not going to want BlackRock to go right next to them. And so you're always trying to figure out not only the individual deal, but how that individual deal fits in with the entire development that you're working on. Because you can't just look at it from a single perspective. Everything has to be very holistic. And it's the same thing with individual build outs of like, okay, well, like we're going to do a build a suit for this guy and a ground lease for this guy. So how are we going to actually develop the site so that they both get the access that they want? Are they going to have to share parking? So like you're kind of orchestrating everybody who all, of course, just wants everything under the sun, but you're trying to make sure everyone like plays nice. Like let's make sure everyone gets what they need, but it's also okay with all of your neighbors that are going to be around you too.
Right. Is the main, you said you work on getting the first 2 kind of in the development. Is those a lot of times grocery stores, Walmarts, things like that? What's kind of like the main?
Yeah, so a lot of it, like you want some kind of like an anchor that's going to be your main guy to go on it. But with the market today, it's kind of like the chicken and the egg of an anchor is hesitant to commit to something if you don't have the pad users. And the pad users don't want to commit to something unless you have the anchor.
Got it.
So you always get into this position of like, we're in talks with these guys and we're in talks with these guys. Like,
what do you
and
think about that?
You need a couple dominoes to fall so that you can start getting the critical mass.
Got it.
And so that it's always the challenge. And every deal's a little bit different in terms of kind of the genesis of like, why did we start looking at this and who was the first guy to go here? But it's always just like kind of playing that game of like, yeah, like we don't really know, but like we're working on it. We're in talks with X, Y, and Z, but we can't even tell you we're in talks with like L and Q and all these people. So it's just like this kind of politics game also. And once you have a site under contract, it's a lot easier to go out and say kind of like, hey, we're working with these guys, or if you have signed leases, kind of everything at that point. But when you're first starting out, it's so hard because you want to go like, I have this great new project and it's got this guy as the anchor and whatever. But if you're not under contract or if you haven't signed a lease, it's like you have to just be really careful, right? Like just make sure like the neighbor that owns the land next to it is like, well, I'll do this one direct with you guys for like a third of the rent or whatever the case is. So you're always trying to like kind of play the politics game and just get everybody, 1, to agree, but 2, to actually get the interest in the site. It's kind of like an art and science mix of like, well, how much can you say and what stuff should you not say, because you're going to end up kind of shooting yourself in the foot.
Yep.
Or you make a commitment and then that guy backs out because, like, as you can imagine, everyone's kind of moving and grooving on all these different sites.
Sure.
And so it's like, oh, well, now I found a site down the street. I want to go on that one. So then that guy ends up leaving, and it's just kind of chaos, but controlled chaos.
A big organization like Dollar General, how many spots are they looking at a time right now? I mean, is it 30 different locations they're trying to grow by the end of next year?
So,
or like how fast is their growth?
We used to get, I think it was 250 intersections every single year from them. So that was just for that one account.
Yeah.
Plus, we work with kind of the multitude of other guys. They are way, way, way more refined and kind of dialed in with what they want. So it's not every tenant's sending you 250.
Sure, yeah.
We also work with the exact opposite of that, where you work with some franchise guy who doesn't know anything about real estate. And he's like, I'd love to do deals. These are my demographics. If you find something, let me know.
Yep.
And so then you have those guys where now you need to do more of that, the kind of like true site selection, demographic selection, and find the stuff that works for them.
And you'll walk them through that whole process.
Yeah.
So if like I wanted to start a coffee shop, let's just say hypothetically, I'm not starting a coffee shop. But if I want to start a coffee shop, you would
breaking it down coffee.
Breaking it down coffee.
Yeah.
That's a good one. Would you would literally help from start to finish of like helping me find the space, even like with the development side of it as well?
Yeah, of course. So for that, it'd probably be something more of like a build-to-suit.
Yep.
So it's like a turnkey deal where essentially the tenant doesn't have much in terms of improvements once they take the space over.
Okay.
So you're getting it essentially as a finished product, and then you're probably going to have to do some fixturing, shelving. Like, we're not going to buy your coffee machines and the stuff you need to run the day-to-day stuff.
Yep.
But we can do it based on whatever build-out you guys need. It all just backs into then what is the rent going to be, right? If you don't need it to be as finished and you don't need us to get as involved with getting this thing finished, you can do it for a lesser rent.
Got it.
So that's why it's really up to the tenants to dictate, is it more cost efficient for them to actually go in and do all the build-outs individually and do all that stuff themselves? Or does it make more sense to just delegate all that to the developer, pay more rent, and then it's almost kind of like amortized of like the cost and time that they would have spent on that by just having a developer take care of it.
Yep.
So it's kind of the whole Rolodex of it.
Yeah. It's like going in and remodeling a house. It's like, all right, well, I could go in and demo it myself, or I could pay somebody to do it, and it's going to cost me a little bit more, but it's probably worth saving my time and energy versus,
Well, and then we run into that too with certain things like a ground lease. So on a ground lease development, essentially they're leasing the ground, and then most times they'll come in, they do their own building, and maybe we do some of the site work, utilities, kind of the basic stuff, but the building's on them. And so then we end up having to get involved, do a little bit more hand-holding, because it's like we would have already been through permitting and they're still on like their second plan. And it's like, guys, like we got to get going.
Move,
right? Like everyone around you is already getting open. Like, you guys need to go. And so it totally depends on the tenant, and it totally depends how sophisticated they are, like what their real estate program is, number of locations, build out. It's just kind of.
And does that vary by the new development, I guess? So like let's say you're doing one where they've got 10 different tenants that are going to be in that development, can 3 of them do it on their own? Or if everyone's kind of using the same developer, I assume that everyone has to use that same developer in a lot of cases.
Yeah, so you can always work together. It's so tough to work with other developers on stuff because
I would think just like the general design and look of everything too, like the aesthetics of that development, everything wants to look kind of the same and copacetic.
Yeah, so fortunately the city with the actual like the design of it, the city's going to be the one to help make sure everybody's kind of following the same guideline.
Got it.
Because you're going to have an ordinance that everyone's probably going to be following the same one within one development. So the design wouldn't be as much of an issue. It's more so trying to figure out like who's paying for what. So if you have a drive aisle going through the middle of this development, well, who's paying for that, right? When you have 2 different developers.
Yep.
So you just have way more things that you have to kind of work through, where if you're the sole developer for it, it's like, well, it's on me. Like I'm doing all
I
of
get to
it.
make that decision.
Yeah, and so it streamlines everything when you can just get one guy to be able to dictate and control everything. Then when you have multiple people all like, okay, well, I'm not paying for that. Like that's on half of your property line. And so it just starts to muddy the water. Plus, developers don't like working with other developers. Every developer just wants to do everything themselves.
Yep.
And so then like egos get involved, and then people blow up, and then everyone's got to piece things together. And so definitely better just to have one guy do the whole thing.
Yeah. What's your favorite part of the process?
It's probably just solving all the different challenges. Every deal, like I was saying, it's so different. And the things that you run into, it's like, you've got to be kidding me. Like, there's no way. Like we've had ones where we go under contract on it, get the title report back, and the guy's going through bankruptcy, and it's in court. We're like, you didn't tell us this thing was about to be like foreclosed on. Like, what are we? So then, like, I had to like take charge of like, okay, now I have to deal with a bankruptcy court so we can even buy this land to begin with.
Yep.
Like, let alone getting entitlements and getting the tenants to approve it and everything else. So it's just solving those things, like just the dynamic of every day being so different and having really tough problems. I love when it's everyone in our team gets presented the news of like, hey, we have to deal with X, and everyone's like, oh, I can't do it. And I'm like, I think I can do it. Like, I'm gonna try to figure this out.
Let me take that on.
Yeah. Which I think has been why, like, personally, I think my personal improvement has been driven so much by that. Because I just love doing that, I volunteered to do stuff that's pretty far outside of my direct job.
Yep.
But it's shown me so many different ways that the mechanics of the deals work and how everything pieces together. And I think it's the best form of learning is just throwing yourself into it and actually figuring out what needs to happen. Like, not following theory, not trying to follow like what the textbook says, but like, okay, well, like, what actually needs to happen for us to get this thing done? And is there a way that we can get this to work where everybody's agreeable to it and actually will do something?
Right. Well, I feel like that's probably one of the hardest reasons why people struggle getting into the commercial space and why it's hard to be successful in the commercial space is because it's a lot of, you have to do it.
Mm-hmm.
And until you have the clients that allow you to kind of go through that process, you're not really going to get the experience unless if you have good mentors or you're under some big teams that are already doing it.
Yeah, I mean, it's so hard to really learn anything unless you're actually able to get your hands on it.
Yep.
Because it's like the classic real estate answer is like, well, how do you do this? Well, it depends. It depends on X and Y and Z. And until you actually are able to solve those problems, you don't understand why the answer is, oh, well, it depends. Like, you just think it's, oh, this guy's just kind of being a whatever, not giving me a good answer. Or
right.
You think it's like, oh, they're overcomplicating it, whatever. But it is. The answer is always it depends. And figuring out what you need to do, it gets so much easier if you just kind of have that action bias.
Yep.
And you're just like, I'm just going to figure this out. I'm going to pick up the phone. I'm going to call these people and just talk to them and see what they want to do. Because it's so easy to say, like, okay, there's 30 different moving parts and everybody wants something different. So, like, I'm going to sit and, like, develop all these plans and figure out how to do it. And then you talk to the first guy and he's like, I'm never going to do that. And you're like, damn it. Like, yeah, like, and so it's just like a moving target and always trying to just, like, keep the good attitude with it.
Yep.
Because you're dealing with a lot of really tough conversations, a lot of stuff that you just don't want to have to deal with. And so, like, with those, it's so important that, like, you're coming from a place of confidence and, hey, like, I am trying to work with you on trying to get this done, so that people actually have the faith that you're going to do it and you're actually going to be able to execute on what you're committing to them.
Yeah. What's been some of your favorite projects you've got to work on?
I'm working on one right now that's probably my favorite one. It's a development out in Buckeye in the Verrado area.
Okay.
So we're working on a new multi-tenant project. It's got medical office. We're going to have a hotel on it. We've got a bunch of pads kind of along the frontage for it. And so it's been so interesting for me of, like I was saying, we're traditionally just a retail group, but now we've got all these different components to it and understanding the needs of each and what everybody needs it's been such a great learning experience for me.
Have you done medical before?
So our company has. I have not personally.
Okay.
So
what's been your experience with that?
So the leases are totally different. So from a leasing perspective, the medical guys need a lot more for the tenant improvement, the allowance that the developer gives them.
Build out's got to be crazy.
Yeah, I mean, you're not buying coffee machines, you're buying MRI machines, right? So like it makes sense that like you need some more upfront cost on that.
Yep.
And so just the underwriting and the budgeting of it's been so different. And fortunately, we have a really good broker that we're working with on that one.
Okay.
And he's been able to help us out a lot with kind of having those conversations and giving us the guidance of like, hey, like you can't quote these guys a retail rent because it's medical. And so it's, for me personally, just being able to learn like, okay, I can't just assume that I know everything. On that project especially, I have to be okay with taking a step back and like, okay, like, I'm going to need your guidance, plus the people at our company that know more than I do of like, okay, you guys need to help me get through this. So it's been really cool for me to like have to step back and have to learn new things and have to get through a whole new experience. Like just as I start thinking like, okay, I'm pretty good at retail, like I'm getting this, then it's like, oh, I know nothing. Great.
Curveball, here we go.
Yeah, great. I know nothing. So good.
That's awesome though. Another thing to learn.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, exactly. Never stops.
Yep. You obviously work really closely with Josh Simon. What's kind of the goal for Simon CRE? Where are you guys taking this thing?
Yeah, so the big goal is he wants to have $1 billion in real estate kind of under management.
Oh, just
just casual billion. So we're working towards that. We're still at our core a merchant developer, which is kind of the buy, build, sell, repeat.
Okay.
And so with us selling most of the stuff, really it's just been the result of cap rates compressing as much as they have. It just makes more sense to sell and then roll that capital in the next deal, especially when you're doing the single tenant projects.
Yep.
But as we start to transition to more of those multi-tenant projects and working on the project like the one we have out in Surprise, it's 700,000 feet of ground up retail. So you can't think about that the same way you do a single tenant Starbucks, right? It's apples and like pears or bananas or like like pineapple. It's like so different.
It's not even fruit.
Yeah, exactly. Right. Yeah, exactly. So it's so much different. You just have to have a different approach to it from the business side. And so Josh has been really good at like transitioning not away from the single tenant stuff, but adding that kind of as a supplement where we still have the single tenant development. That's still what built us. It's those single hit runs that's allowed Josh to build the company. But we're also adding in that whole other dynamic, which is we're not just single tenant guys. We're also guys that are actually able to take on any project, work with any anchor, and put together any project of any size.
Yeah, love that. There's obviously a big shift in the real estate market on the residential side with interest rates kind of continuing to climb and everything. It's definitely slowed down, and it's just been kind of a different market, if you would, on the residential side. How has commercial been impacted? Yeah,
so I was just at the ICSC Western Conference last week in San Diego, and that was obviously kind of the talk of the town. Is
ICSC, what's that?
So it's the International Council of Shopping Centers. Yep. So it's like the local group or regional group for retail. Okay. So it's kind of like NAIOP for like
got it.
Much more geared towards retail.
Okay. How many people were there?
Probably 2,000 to 3,000, I would think. I don't know what the exact count was. Yep. That one's the smaller one. There's a big one in Vegas in May, and that one I think is usually like 30 or 40,000 people. So this one's just kind of like the more local Western kind of United States group.
How many went to the ICSC?
The one that we just had in San Diego?
Yeah.
I think it was probably like 3,000 to 4,000.
No, I mean like from your group though.
Oh, we had 4 people.
4 people. Cool.
Yeah. Yeah, so it's like just our like core sales group goes out there to meet with everybody.
Got it.
But yeah, so in talking with everybody, retail hasn't really seen it yet, but it's very evident that it's coming. Okay. So obviously the rise in interest rates as a developer directly affects us, considering most of our construction debt is floating rate. So every one of those Fed hits, like that, every single one just immediately kind of hits the bottom line. Yep. So that affects it. Construction is still the biggest driving factor in what we're seeing and what's kind of preventing growth of just it's so tough to get stuff to pencil.
Actually sourcing contractors and actually getting supplies and everything.
Well, and just getting deals to pencil. Yeah. So we've had deals just fall out where we underwrite the deal and then 9 months later you get your permits, you get the hard bid based on those new plans, and 6 months later it's literally double what you thought it was going to be. Yeah. And obviously we weren't planning for that. Like you have some contingency, but you don't double whatever your construction amount is. Yep. So like that's obviously been like just a huge wrench in so many different projects, but the tenant demand is still very strong. So retailers, the earnings are still really good. People are going out and shopping. Nationally, the vacancy rate for retail is the lowest it's been in 15 years. So retail is doing really good, especially those outdoor centers. They have more traffic now than they did pre-COVID. So everything's still doing very well, but it's obvious that there's something coming, right? Like it'd be crazy to sit here and be like, oh, well, it's good now, so it's going to be good in 6 to 9 months. I don't think we've seen the repercussions of everything with those interest rates and how that's going to actually start affecting things. So it's really just a question of how much is that going to affect things. Yep. And then as a merchant developer, we're doing everything knowing we're going to sell a lot of it at the end. And so everything's been based on those cap rates of what you actually sell it for. Yep. And fortunately, that hasn't gone up like in proportion to what the interest rates have. but it's going to have to, right? Like everything's like at that critical point right now, where right now everything's still going strong, and I'm not saying it needs to go really south, but it's clear there's just momentum going in the wrong direction, and so it's kind of anyone's guess of like what their crystal ball is going to say on how everything's going to play out over the next, call it 9-18 months.
Right. When you're doing like construction bids, I assume that those are like month by month, considering if they're going to actually be able to execute those, and then they have to rebid based on construction costs and stuff like that, or how's that?
Yeah, I mean it's insane. So it's like it just makes no sense especially when you just are so back ordered on different things. So like a good example is the TSMC. All of the manufacturing, everything going for that, it's literally just a black hole of all the resources that Phoenix has for construction. And so we're on concrete allocations, and we can't get anything because it's like, oh, well, half of Phoenix is out working on TSMC right now.
I'm sorry, but they're our biggest contractors, so we're sending it to them.
And our entire project is literally a rounding error on their budget. And so it's like, hey, like we'd love to help you, but like you get it. Like we got to kind of, so that's the toughest thing is still construction. Hands down is still the biggest challenge.
What is the expected completion date of that, the Taiwanese semiconductor, do you know?
I'm not sure, but I know they've got 30 whatever cranes out there, so they're moving.
It's insane.
Yeah. Every time you drive by, it looks like an amusement park or something. There's just so much stuff going on.
I played Quintero Golf Course like 3-4 weeks ago or whatever, and drove by, and like and then you pass by, and then there's all those contractor signs that are like randomly out there, and there's like 50 of them, and like all those are just pop up things that just kind of went in there because of that project. It's pretty crazy. Yeah,
it's the black hole of Arizona. It's great.
We're actually trying to get in with them for their relocation business right now. So,
oh, yeah?
Yeah, hopefully that'll pan out.
Nice.
Yeah, we'll see.
Nice.
Fingers crossed. What's been the hardest thing for you in kind of the years of getting into the space?
I think the toughest thing, especially starting out, was trying to build relationships. It's so hard when you're first starting if you can't talk the talk and you don't really know anybody. It was so hard going to those conventions, especially starting off, because I was like 22. I'd walk up and like, are you guys looking to grow, or like, do you guys want to do deals?
Get out of here, kid.
And they're literally like, who are you? Whatever. So that was really tough for me, is just having to like force myself to kind of try to build relationships and just try to learn as much as I can so that I actually can have the conversations that need to be had. So I've gotten a lot better at that, but that definitely has just been, when you're first starting out in commercial, you're dealing with guys that couldn't care less if their life depended on it, and you're like just trying to be like, hey, like, can you please tell me like where you're looking? Like, I'd love to find you sites, like just trying to piece stuff together. And so it's like building those relationships and then finding the people that are willing to actually show you the ropes on things, which fortunately at Simon CRE we've got a really good team, and everyone's been really good at kind of getting me up to speed and kind of showing me everything that I need to know. But starting out, that would definitely be my advice to anybody, is just work on the relationships and work on learning as much as you can, because real estate is really just a game of relationships, right? The people that are the most successful are the ones that have the strongest connections, and that's both on the client side as well as on the developer side. You have all of your vendors, you have all of your consultants, your architects, your engineers, your contractors that you use. It's a game of piecing together the greatest like dream team that you can to actually execute on all the projects you're working on.
Love it. Yeah, it's all relationship, right? I mean, because they're going to choose your projects over other projects, or they're going to make sure that they're providing you the level of service before others, or whatever it is, or make sure you're getting the products first, or whatever. There's so much in terms of relationships, I'm sure, on your guys' side especially.
Yeah, for sure.
Someone jumping into commercial real estate, what would be your advice?
I would probably start on the brokerage side. I think in terms of just learning how a deal works, who the players are, the different product types, just the lay of the land. I think brokerage, just getting the transaction volume would be really good. So I'd say if it's just commercial real estate in general, I would say probably start on the brokerage side. If you're trying to go the development route, it's pretty tough to get into, because I think the MRED at ASU is probably a really good one if you're trying to work here in Phoenix, just getting your master's and then like using that to get in the door at some other shop.
What was that?
The Master of Real Estate Development at ASU. So I think that's probably a good way to get in. Like I was just an intern, so I just started making literally minimum wage for a year. It was like, this is great. Like,
put in the work and learned.
Yeah, exactly. So it's like, especially on the development side, if you're starting, and brokerage is not dissimilar, you're not going to make very much money for your first 2 to 3 years.
Yep.
Like it doesn't really matter who you are. Like there's some people that get in and just have the dream job of, they have some senior guy that kind of takes them under and gives them some good split or something.
Yep.
But for the most part, you have to be okay with just understanding you're learning a lot and you're not going to be paid a lot.
Yep.
But it's kind of like you're getting your like MBA almost of like, hey, I'm going to spend 3 years and I'm not going to probably make very much money, knowing then like once you roll out, then you can actually start like putting together deals, and then you actually start getting the cuts that kind of you've been working towards.
Yep. Goals for Austin?
Staying in the single tenant game for now.
Yeah.
So definitely want to keep on the path that I'm in. Like I was saying, I love the people that I work with. The community, especially here in Phoenix, it's some of my really good friends now are people that I work with, which has been so cool. Just going from like, okay, now I'm going to like call this random broker to now I'm hanging out with them on the weekend and stuff. So I love the people that I work with. So it's definitely staying in the like retail space, trying to get farther into that and just kind of keep doing what I'm doing now. Yep. So I love the position I'm in of like actually getting to put together deals and actually getting to solve the difficult problems. And then I'm also at a point now where I have a team that's able to help me out a lot. So I'm not the one that has to individually like go and do every single step, but I'm able to delegate stuff out to the different teams that we have.
Okay.
So just continuing to learn, continuing to grow, and trying to put together deals.
Talk about some of your team members.
So I've got 3 full-time people that are part of my direct team.
Yeah.
So we've got 2 guys that are like further along in the process that have been there for like a year now. And then we just brought on another guy to help as well.
Cool.
So they are kind of just the deal hounds of like, I'm like, hey, like see who owns the site, see if it's zoned right, see if we can buy it. And they'll just go for that stuff.
Yep.
As well as all the site planning, working on some of the budgeting, like trying to just see, is this a deal that we can even do? So it's working on that side is my like direct team.
Okay.
And then outside of that, we've got probably 6 or 7 other departments within Simon CRE. So we have the full in-house construction team, in-house development. We've got all the different departments where as I'm putting together and doing my job, it's so nice just being able to walk over and like, hey, I'm looking at this. What am I missing on this? Like, I'm sure there's something that I'm just not seeing on the site plan or looking at a bid. Like, what am I missing in this? And so it's so cool having a team that everyone's kind of working together just to understand. It's like, hey, like we're all going to eventually have to work on this to get to the end goal. So like, let's just try to work on it right now. Yep. And not just kick the can down the road and just be like, well, that sounds like a you problem. So everyone's really good. Yeah, everyone's really good at like trying to work together and just actually solve all the problems.
Love that. Why Simon CRE? Why would someone choose Simon as their?
So for retail, it's like undoubtedly, I think it's the hottest shop, especially in Arizona. Like looking at the regional mall space, nothing's been built in 10 years, right? Like Desert Ridge, Tempe Marketplace, like those Vestar developments,
yep.
Like that, nothing's really happened like that in 10 years. And we were the first ones to kind of like put our stake in and like, yeah, we're going to take a run at this. And we're now under construction on one out in Surprise.
Okay.
So I think
what's that
just,
one called?
It's Prasada is like the name of the community.
Okay.
So it's like Waddell and the 303.
Okay.
Yeah, so it's I think Josh does a very good job of not thinking in terms of like, oh, well, what would other people do? And like, well, what's like this guy doing? And like, oh, well, that guy did that. But more so being like, I'm going to just improve every single day and we're going to make this the best that we can make it.
Yep.
And then getting the team of people behind him that's able to allow him to execute kind of on all the big goals.
He's just kind of a badass go-getter, is he not? I've never met him myself.
Yeah, he just doesn't stop.
Yeah.
Like he wakes up at 4 a.m. and works till 7 or 8 o'clock at night. And like when we go on different tours and stuff, we always share hotel rooms just because like our company's very much of the mindset of like frugality and like trying to keep really good values.
Yep.
And so like I'll share a hotel with them and he'll be over there like pounding on his laptop until like 10 o'clock at night, falls asleep, wakes up, and he's like right back to it. Or like I'm trying to go to bed and he's like talking about like, well, so how was the day? Like how was that meeting? Whatever. And I'm like, I need to go to bed, dude. Like I get it. We'll go over this in the morning.
I need to function tomorrow.
Yeah. Like I need to sleep. So yeah, he doesn't stop. So like his work ethic just like unparalleled. The guy just keeps going.
Yeah. Yeah, it sounds like a one-stop shop and just a good organization to work for, no question about it.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. For people that want to get a hold of you, talk about development, talk about new retail development stuff coming up, just commercial real estate in general, how can they get a hold of you?
Yeah, I mean, I'm always available. I'd say just call my cell.
Okay.
So 602-573-0809.
Cool.
I'm happy to meet with anybody, and especially newer guys trying to get in the industry. Love to give you my 2 cents, whatever that's worth. So
yeah, that's huge. I appreciate that.
Yeah, of
I'm
course.
sure they would appreciate that, I guess. Well, Austin, thank you very much for coming on today, and that was awesome. Thank you.
Yeah, of course, man. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Thanks for sticking around for another episode of Break It Down with Braydon, and stick around, more to come. Thanks, guys.